Knowing what to look for as a real estate investor when you're walking through a property that might be your next investment can be intimidating. So, I'm going to share with you, after 10 years of experience as a real estate investor, I'm going to share with you some of the things I look for. Obviously, that's not going to negate, knowing when to hire the trusted professionals, even beyond a home inspector, to certain, whether it's, someone to check out a roof, a foundation, electrical, plumbing, whatever. But let's get to it. For those who don't know, I'm doing one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. Let's get to today's topic. All right. So, what do I look for when I walk a house? It has come to a point where I'm very thorough when I walk a house. You almost can't take me anywhere in public because my eyes are now trained to see things, whether that is, sorry, at a friend's house, whether it's at a restaurant in New Orleans, um, whatever it may be. My eyes are trained to look for things. And so I kind of want to just share with you through, and I've got a list of stuff that I look for. And then from there, I want to really just give you some of my general thoughts for walkthrough and hope this brings you some value. So, one of the first things I look for, and this starts even from the outside, is overall, I'm getting a feel if the house is quirky. And what I mean by quirky is that, um, for example, is this an odd house from its overall design? That could be anything from the outside, and that can even be the floor plan. The reason why, wondering if a house is quirky, the reason why that's really important is that really can impact, maybe how it's if it's functional. Overall, a quirky house can be fixed, but sometimes it is almost too costly to fix it. So that is something I am paying attention to. And floor plan's a really big one, especially with some of those older houses and things like that. Obviously, the trend is more open concept. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but I'm just paying attention to things like the flow of the house. Now, the other things I want to pay attention to is really the mechanicals, the major mechanicals. Okay. So when I walk a house, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside, and then eventually I am going to walk around the entire outside. So when I'm inside, I'm going to be looking, for example, for plumbing. I go and I look under every single sink. So kitchen sink, bathroom sinks. Again, if there's more than one bathroom, I want to check them all. And some of the things I'm looking at is the plumbing that's coming from, the sink into the wall. What's going on there? I'm also looking at basically if there's been any water damage underneath the sink. That's a very common one, right? Like if there's a leak under the sink, and then that also might be able to tell me a story of some deferred maintenance there. So I'm looking at plumbing. When I'm doing the exterior, I can also see some potential for plumbing. If it is a raised house, I will look underneath to pay attention to the plumbing. Some of the things you want to pay attention to, things like the old cast iron and you know, the older plumbing styles. Now, let me preface all this by saying this will vary by the location you live in and obviously the age of the property. I'm ultimately looking to see, does it have, the white PVC? Does it have the red and the blue PEX piping? What's going on there? Is it the old cast iron? There's different types of plumbing I'm paying attention to because ultimately I want to make sure I understand, especially for the major mechanicals, what's going on. Now, if you live in a city like New Orleans, where we are a sinking city, I was born and raised on the North Shore, where we're not having as much soil subsidence as the actual city of New Orleans. And so when I moved into the city of New Orleans, I started buying more properties in the city of New Orleans. I realized that there is a reason why every single home inspection includes staking a camera through the pipes, because you want to see, not only do you want to see things like, is it clogged or is there roots coming through those, through the pipes, but you also want to see if there's a belly, if it's sagging, if it's breaking, if it's rusted out, rusted through, right? Like issues like that. So if you have some concerns with the plumbing, you could always hire a plumber who Basically, they have this camera, they can snake it through the plumbing. And, sometimes it's a few $100, and that can actually help you really understand the condition of your plumbing. Okay. The things you want to pay attention to with the plumbing is that you want to make sure that you want to know what type of plumbing it is throughout the house. You also want to know if there's any history of leaks, basically plumbing leaks, whether that be underneath sinks or elsewhere. All right, so moving on to electrical. When I am looking at electrical, I am going to go and look at the breaker panel, the electrical panel. Uh, Sometimes that is interior, sometimes that is only exterior, sometimes there is more than one, especially if there's been an addition, there is more than one. And I'm going to take a look for that. What I'm wanting to see is number one, I want to make sure it's not being messed with. And so, for example, if it doesn't have the face on it, if there's wires hanging out everywhere, if there's missing breakers, all that, that can kind of bring some concern. If those are not actual breakers, the little switch that you switch on and back and forth, but instead there's these circular things called fuses, that's going to be of concern. When it comes to electrical, I'm paying attention not only to the breaker panel, but when I go up in the attic, I'm going to look up there as well, and I'm going to be looking at the cables. Ultimately, again, I would encourage you. Some of this I can better do than explain, and I think that's where my fear with this episode was going to come into play. But that is one of the things that I'm going to pay attention here. When it's an older house, especially if it's let's say a 1907, like mid 70s and older, I am going to be very much paying attention to the electrical and to the plumbing, because those can be issues. Age matters. Sometimes I will do the research on the computer to try to figure out the actual age of the house, if that is a concern. One of the next things I look for is I do take a look at the foundation. Here in New Orleans, we are a sinking city. And so foundation really matters. A lot of houses do have settling. Here, my house is, less than 10 years old, and it's already has settling. It's just to par down here. So obviously when you're walking in a house, some signs I want to look for. So if you're seeing some cracks, know that they don't always mean something bad, right? I have had, like, for example, I have a house right now that was built in the 1980s. Even in the exterior of the house, you can see in the brick that there's cracks by the windows and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. We actually have a structural engineer report that says they came out and inspected the house, and it showed that basically all that movement happened in the first few years of its life, and these were just the cosmetic effects of it afterwards, that it was not still moving. So know that that can be the case sometimes. When you have concern, hire a professional. Same thing with plumbing, electrical. When you have a concern, hire a professional in that field. For foundation, through houses, for example, the other day I walked through a house, and the realtor and his son was with us, and I would open the door to say something to him, but then I'd walk and go. I had my notepad on the kitchen counter, so I was taking notes. Well, the door kept closing on its own. When doors close on their own and they're not self-closing doors, you know, whatever that looks like in a house these days, you want to be concerned. If you walk through a house and you kind of feel like, whoa, that's not even. One good test you can do is keep a marble in your car. And if you're walking a house that seems unlevel, go get a marble and place it in the corner of one room. If it moves, and especially if it moves all with some speed, you have some difference of level there. But frequently you will see doors closing themselves, or drawers staying open, like opening themselves, doors opening themselves, basically because they're not, properly level. So when it comes to foundation, I'm paying attention to those things. I am walking around the house. I am looking at the actual foundation. If it is a brick on slab, I'm wanting to hope to be able to see that slab foundation around. If it is raised, I'm putting my head underneath. I'm finding an opening and I'm looking underneath there. Is there anything worrisome that I'm seeing underneath there? Foundation is really important. If you see major signs with a foundation issue, again, hire a professional to give you a report and give you an estimate and see what's going on there. Sometimes it makes sense to leave it, right? Hey, the settling is done. Just fix the cosmetics. Or you want to know when it is a bigger issue that you need to know about. The next thing I do is I'm going to look at the HVAC. So depending on your style of house will depend on what type of cooling unit does it have. Does it have window units? With window units, I'm always going to be looking at those windows. So if they're the ones that go in the windows, I'm going to be looking. Very common to have rot issues in those windows. So you want to be careful of that. If it is a mini split, same thing. You want to make sure that there's not basically water dripping from the mini splits. You want to make sure that that's not an issue. And then otherwise, if it's just a normal, heating and cooling system, normal AC, I'm going to look at a few things. So you've got, like basically what I would call like a little, sometimes inside you'll have the return that you can open up, like a little closet that you can see inside of there. So I'm going to look at that. I'm going to look at the unit outside, and when I go in the attic, I'm going to look up there. When I'm in the attic, I'm going to look and make sure that there's basically the drainage pan. I'm make sure that that's not rusted out, not holding a lot of water. I am going to look for some dates. So they often have these stickers that have a lot of information on the actual manufacturing, and a lot of times they'll have the date of that product. Especially the exterior unit is going to have something like that. I am often looking for a date that is tied with the manufacturer, and those are things I'm looking at. The other thing there is if it is noticeably hot, one of the tools I keep in my bag is I actually have a little, like this little gun thing that if the thermostat is set on 70, I can actually put that up into the into one of the returns, and I can actually see what temperature that is blowing. If it's not 70 degrees, I was about to sneeze. Um, it's going to come here in a second. Basically, if you've given the system plenty of time to cool down to 70, and once you have read that, and if it's not reading it, you're basically seeing some problems. Those are some of the things I'm looking for. I don't always carry that little temperature gun with me, but it was something that I have used from time to time. I actually used it on some rentals, so sometimes I use it when I'm walking a house. Totally not necessary. All right. Obviously with HVAC, you want to make sure that you have one. Unfortunately, those are one of the things that get stolen very frequently alongside some of the uh, two more things for the truth as far as I can, whether on the street, in the yard, and I'm going to try to look, and I want to see if there's any disruption on that roof, where there looks to be some issues. I'm going to look and see if, like, basically, is it a metal roof? Is it a shingle roof, asphalt roof? Is there any granular loss in some of that? Like, does it look very worn? Is there any patches? So for example, I walked one the other day and they said it was like a 2 or 3 year old roof. And I was like, basically BS. There's a patch on there. That patch might be 2 or 3 years old, but the rest of this roof is older. Um, so you want to kind of take a look at that. Um, when I'm in the attic, I am going to look up, and it's going to look like basically plywood underneath the roof. If I see any dark coloration, that is often signature of like the signature of you know, a water leak. The other thing is there's supposed to be basically these different vents on your roof, um, and these different stacks on your roof. In the attic, I'm near those because those are also common areas for leaks. And so those are things I'm going to look at. Obviously, the seller knows I'm going to be out about all these things. What age is the AC? What age is the roof? Have you ever had any issues with the electrical, any issues with the plumbing, any issues with the AC? So, two more things here. As far as some properties do have private utilities, so septic or sewage treatment and a well, those are really, kind of case by case specific, a little bit rural. If your area has those, please learn how to properly look at those. I have plenty of friends in the New Orleans area who buy properties if they buy properties on the North Shore, and if there's a sewage treatment and there is a well, they're like, I don't even know what to do. Inform yourselves on what to look at. Those are big ticket items as well. And so you don't want to get that wrong. And the last one, when it comes to major mechanical, I almost didn't include this in here because I don't feel it is as major of a mechanical, but it is important, is the water heater. Sometimes people call it a hot water heater, but ultimately a water heater, some of the things I'm looking at is, you can go and see on the information sticker, is there any basically expert, like, what's the date on it? I have plenty of water heaters that are older. I'm talking 80s and 90s that are still running strong. They don't make them like they used to. You just want to be aware. A lot of times, depending on the size house, things like that, depending on where the water heater is located, all of those things, which it may be down like in the actual house or it actually may be in the attic. I'm going to pay attention to it. If it's a bigger house, there may be more than one water heater. There are what's called tankless water heaters. Those are all things I want to pay attention to and I want to understand because they can become expensive to repair, to replace. All of these major mechanicals, that's all that I'm going to go through. So the HVAC, the roof, the electrical, plumbing, foundation, septic and well if they have it, and the water heater. These things are important because basically these can become big ticket items if you don't understand. You should understand, are they functioning properly and as they are supposed to? Are they current products or are they old products? Are they meaning like, for example, um, PVC piping or is it old copper or cast iron? Right? Like which one you want to understand what's going on with the mechanicals. And then is there an issue that you should be aware of? And then lastly, is it working now? But for example, will it something that's coming up soon? So I had reach out to me and they're like, hey, I want to sell you one of my houses. But ultimately, the roof had about 5 years left on it. And so knowing I had to build that into my numbers because in 5 to 7 years, I was going to have to replace that roof. That's a big deal. All right. Major mechanicals, really, really important to note them. And not only just to note if they're working, but to note if they're soon going to not be. Too many people don't plan for that. All right. Let's talk about some of the other big issues. So 5 big issues I look for. Major mechanicals. Termite issues. So termites down here in the South where, we've got moisture issues galore. We also have termite issues. So this is going to be very based thing because that's where I buy my properties. When it comes to termites, when I am walking the exterior of the house, I am looking. If it is slab house, I am trying to look at that slab, that where the slab meets the ground. I am trying to look at it and looking to see if I see any tunnels, these little tunnels that almost look like dirt, and see what I can do. Now, let me see if I can actually pull this up and see if you can actually see it. But earlier today, it was very sad. I was walking a new construction property. Property was built 2 years ago, and they had a moisture problem. They had a water problem in the garage. And I said, you know what? I want to walk on the outside where that water issue is. So basically, I saw on the inside the water issue. Let me go look outside. And I found a dreaded dirt pile column on the slab. Started picking. At first, the agent was like, "Hey, that might be ants or something," and so I started picking at. Watch this video. So if you're only listening right now, you're gonna miss out. Literally live turn. So right here, you can actually see. So I took my pin. It was actually too hard to break with my fingers. I took my pin and I poked at it, and sure enough, live termites fell out of it. So you want to pay attention for stuff like that. And so I'm looking for these, on the slab, I'm looking for those little trails. Sometimes I've seen them gone up. you know, cinder blocks. That's less common. Basically, termites need wood and water, so be very careful with that. I'm gonna ask the seller, are you on a termite contract? Is it current? You know, if not, do you do anything else to treat for them? If they say no, I'm gonna be very much aware. And then, ultimately when I'm inside, I'm gonna be paying attention. If I ever see some basically some dark colors on the wall, like it almost looks like little holes in the wall and stuff like that, especially around windows, especially in corners. I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to ask them if they've ever had termite issues. I don't care about necessarily about the swarming ones that kind of like fly by the lights. I care about the ones that are coming from the ground. uh but nonetheless, I'm paying attention. Termite issues. Again, I'm asking about that. Another one of the third things that I'm worried about, the top five things that I'm worried about, is fire damage. If I ever get any type of whiff, whether through conversation or through visuals, that there has been a fire, I'm gonna ask all about it. Was it properly remediated? Was it, how big was it? All that. I'm looking for, things that were charred as well as soot. Soot is like basically, I don't even know how to explain soot, but when my loved one was buying a house, I said, I'll go walk properties with you, but I promise you I'm going to opinion of them, probably almost all of them. And one of them, sure enough, in New Orleans, houses are very close together. And so I walked down, almost had to turn sideways walking down the sideway of the two houses. And so I'm looking at this house, but then I look at the house next to it. And sure enough, the house next to it had all sorts of, soot and fire damage. And I'm like, what's the story of the neighbor's house catching on fire? Right? Like, I want to know because those houses are way too close together. I want to know. Those things are really important with fire damage. Anytime you see anything that alludes to it, you should ask more questions. All right, fourth issue that I am paying attention to when I walk a house is water damage. Again, today I walked a house, the one that the termite damage. Unfortunately, I opened up the garage door and I immediately smelled moisture. So this is after 10 years in the business. I've learned what it smells like. But water damage, moisture damage, there is a strong that had a strong odor to it. But I'm looking for things like moisture issues. I'm looking for things like leaks. I'm looking for things such as flood damage. And I'm also looking at rot, which is, you know, a long-term form of water damage. So, moisture issues. Some of the things I'm going to pay attention to, if it is older windows, sometimes older windows that are single pane can sweat and cause. So most common area is going to be about around windows. If I ever see something and it seems off, I will knock on the wood. And there have been times that I have knocked on wood and I have knocked on sheetrock and my knuckles have gone through. So, um, keep that in mind. For leaks, again, I'm looking underneath every single sink. I'm looking in the attics. I'm looking at things like the water heater and the air conditioner, and I'm looking for things when it comes to those leaks. I'm even looking at faucets, and I'm even looking like in the tub and whatnot. Are they dripping? Those things are important. Um, I'm asking, is there any flood damage in the state of Louisiana? You have to disclose it. A seller has to disclose it, and if they're aware of it. And so here we had major hurricanes like Katrina and such. So those are all just things to not only ask but be aware of. And then rot, things like rot. That's really really important, you guys. I mean, these are things that can cause bigger issues, similar to like fire damage, termite damage. It can be more widespread than what you know. And my fifth and final big, big issue I'm looking for is what I call like the chuck with a truck DIY stuff. Um, H HGTV syndrome. Basically, it's this concept of like people who are like, oh, I'm gonna do this work myself. So okay, story time. I walked a house one time and the guy, they were facing foreclosure long story short, they ultimately, when they when they went ahead and I'm trying to remember, I can't recall if both of them were there at the house, but anyway, they were facing foreclosure. I think it was just the woman walking me through the house. Anyway, and I was like, hey, so, basically this would be an as is purchase. Can you show me anything that you know that's wrong with the house? And so, she's pointing things out. And so then she walks me outside. She's like, well, there's two pumps by the pool. Both pumps are burned up because my boyfriend or my fiance, he got drunk and he burned up the pumps. And he was working on it. He likes to work on stuff around the house. I go, okay. So apparently when he was drunk, he ruined it. And I said, so he likes to do projects around the house. What are some of the other projects he has done? Right? Like I'm clocking that, while he was drunk, he ruined a piece of equipment that's expensive. What else has he touched? She goes, girl, he has touched so much in this house. It is a mess. Okay, yeah, show me. We go walk into the living room, and basically, there's a portion of the living room that's sagging at the ceiling. He had done the open concept thing and removed a load bearing wall and did not put any proper support or anything like that. And it was obviously sagging and there was major issue. I was like, so those are some of the things that you want to be very careful with. It can be a DIY, but it can be DIY, but it can also be Chuck with a truck, which is like basically a cheap contractor who doesn't know what they're doing. Similar concepts, and there's not a lot differentiating the two. Maybe someone owns more tools than the others, but that's about it. But the reality is, you just want to be very mindful. And if I ever start to see that some of that has happened, I want to say, what all have they touched? So pay attention to that stuff because it is not only is it expensive, they think they added value, but at the same time, I have to go back and undo all that they did. And that can be expensive. Last little bonus item I'm going to give you is if there's a chimney, I'm always going to pay attention to the chimney because I have had chimneys that were falling away from the house, and that's a concern. So with that being said, there's a lot more I could say here. I could also have said a lot less. I feel like I was rambling today, and I think it's because I'm tired. It's been a long few days. The Super Bowl was this past weekend here. But these are some of the things I look for. Don't be afraid to take your time on a walkthrough. And also, if you are, especially if you're early on, look, please hire a home inspector. Please hire a home inspector until you become more proficient. And even then, I frequently will hire professionals to check things out when I'm buying a property. And so, with that being said, guys, some of it's just going to come with repetition and exposure and learning things. Do not get into this day thinking about you quickly learn a lesson. Hey, guys, thanks for staying tuned. If you listened all the way through, you held out like a champ because I felt like I was rambling tonight. This is one video day, first 100 days of 2025. See you guys for tomorrow.